right, guys, welcome to another edition of Texans Unfiltered, a Houston football podcast for your Houston Texans. I am young Ari Gold, and today is kind of one of those weird days for me. It's an exciting day because I actually get to idol's not a word I'll throw around. I think that's probably not fair. I'm 38. I don't know if I should have another man as my idol at this point. But I will say somebody that that got me into Houston sports radio, got me really into being a Houston sports fan. And to have the ability to have a conversation with Sean Pendergast from SportsRadio 610 today is it's awesome and exciting. So, Sean, welcome to Texans Unfiltered.
Ari, it is great to be on Texans Unfiltered, man. This is fun. This is a fun time of year. Just got done watching Bryce Young toss a pigskin around against Air, and that gets me excited. I'm fired up, man.
Pigskin, Air, shorts, shirt. I mean, nothing could be more exciting.
Nothing says football more than pigskin, Air, shorts, and shirts. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. The timeline right now is very much they're so pissed that Nick's not there. They can't understand why Nick Caserio is not there. And obviously, you interviewed him on Monday. Mm-hmm. He told you he pretty much wouldn't be there. Do you think that there are any advantages though to being there? Like, I saw one person say like, well, the connections, the networking, and I'm like, if anybody can call Nick Saban in the NFL and have just a genuine conversation, it's probably Nick Caserio.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, Nick Caserio has been doing this for over 20 years. His network's fine. Like, I don't think there's anything I don't think there's anybody he needs to go meet there to feel like, okay, I need to open up this other avenue for me, and either in my career or to get more information. Like, I would probably put his network up against anybody in a GM position. And he's still a fairly young guy. He's been doing it a long, long time. I think what it comes down to is, and I know the argument that people make is, well, you're going to be picking one of these two guys. Don't you want to get every shred of information that you can possibly get? And sure, obviously you do. There's only so much time between now and the draft. They got 11 picks or 12 picks now, I guess. And I think it's about Nick being able to look at the next month or so and go, okay, what am I going to get out of going to Tuscaloosa to see Bryce Young that I either haven't already gotten or that I'm not going to get when he comes and visits NRG or through other conversations that I had between now and then. And the fact of the matter is, it's not like Nick is spending his time while James Lipford and the scouts are in Tuscaloosa and Columbus. It's not like he's sitting in his office,
playing Tetris,
playing Call of Duty. Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
He was at SMU's pro day yesterday.
Yeah.
I know U of H has a pro day today. I'm not sure if Nick is there or not at that, but he's probably doing. I'll just use SMU yesterday as an example. You got Stroud's pro day going on in Columbus. You got the SMU pro day. Chances are there's things happening at that SMU pro day that he's going to get one chance at doing. Watching this guy work out, talking to this guy, talking to this coach. He's going to get more chances to interact with Bryce Young. And let's face it, he's got more intel on Bryce Young and CJ Stroud probably than any other prospects in this draft. So I think it's just about – Nick uses the phrase on our show a lot when he comes on with us, allocation of resources.
Yeah.
And usually when he's talking about that, he's talking about cap space or he's talking about draft picks or he's, just some sort of capital. I think another resource is his time and allocating that. So I think it's about the best use of time. I don't get too worked up that he's not there. I think too, Ari, we're coming out of a phase, hopefully coming out of it, with the Texans where I think we were in this phase, and rightfully so. The Texans earned this spot, earned with air quotes, where anything they're going to do, people are going to look at with a skeptical eye. Anything they do, there's going to be a big faction of the fan base that are going to look at and say they should do the opposite. There would be fans out there still, I think, that if Nick were to go to these pro days, he'd be like, well, why does he need to go there? He knows what Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are all about. He should be off doing something else. So I think we're coming out of that phase now. And I think, I know we're going to talk about Demeco probably a bunch of times in this conversation. I think Demeco is almost like the get out of jail card for a lot of this stuff that the Texans put themselves in, with things like hiring Jack Easterby and giving him all that power and all those other things. So it's a long answer of saying I don't have a big problem with Nick not being there. I understand it.
Yeah, I think, it's not that big of a deal. I think if we go based off of Nick's trend from last year, it seemed like logistically staying local was his mission.
Yeah.
And it showed, right? It showed. And then This year, I think so. He's at SMU. He's probably going to be at U of H if I had to guess, just because it's such a short drive and easy. It's easy to get to. I think last year he was at UTSA, and so I would assume he'll probably stay within the Texas range, maybe Oklahoma, whatever, which I think makes sense. You brought up kind of everything they do is going to be criticized. Fair, sure. I take the approach of I think they have the right to be criticized up to a certain extent, but I kind of closed the book.
Mm-hmm.
I really am not reading that book anymore. I'm kind of on Saga 2 or whatever series it would be.
Yes.
Because I don't think that there's a reason to associate the past now with kind of where they're at, right? I think a lot of times people are holding on to Nick because Easterby was here when he was hired.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest piece that people are hanging on to is, did Easterby want Nick? And then ignoring the facts of that Bob McNair wanted Nick.
Yeah.
Cal McNair wanted Nick. Multiple times, but yet they seem to just come out of the woodworks and trash anything he does. And I think he's actually done a really good job. He's missed, don't get me wrong, but who hasn't missed on their job? I've missed on my job.
Yep. Yeah, he's not been perfect. There's no question about that. And I still think the jury's out on some of the bigger moves that he's made. Well, I think the book, if we're going to talk about the moves where we look at and go, okay, that was questionable or it didn't work. I think that the Brandon Cooks extension, the sequence of that was a failure. There's no way to give Brandon Cooks the extension. If you told Nick, hey, Brandon's going to sign this extension in April of 2022 or whatever it was, and the end result is going to be that you're eating millions of dollars to dump him for 2 day 3 picks to the Cowboys of all teams.
Right.
I don't think he would have said, cool, that's the goal. So that was a failure. I think the jury's still out on Stingley and Kenyon Green.
Yeah.
Are they going to turn into guys who are worth the 3rd overall pick or the 15th overall pick? Hell, the jury's still out. Kenyon Green, the question is he going to turn into a viable starter, let alone somebody worthy of the 15th pick in the draft? So, yeah, he's done some things. Certainly he's made mistakes or he's made moves where the jury is very much still out on those. I think to me, the big things are cleaning up the salary cap, kind of just getting everything reset. And then obviously the Deshaun Watson trade. To me, the way he handled that is something that really buys him a lot of leeway, should buy him a lot of leeway. And especially when you watch how the Packers are handling the Aaron Rodgers thing, where they're at this standoff now, where if they had just handled that the same way Nick handled the Deshaun trade, where he wouldn't let teams talk to Deshaun. Deshaun's under contract. He's their property, same way Aaron Rodgers is Green Bay's property. He wasn't going to let them talk to Deshaun until they made their offer. And so we're watching the opposite of that play out now with Green Bay and New York. And that's I won't say it's a disaster. I think it gets done, but at the very least, it's something that's an inconvenience right now for both franchises. So, I think overall he's probably done a B or a B plus job. He hasn't been perfect. And honestly, I always call it the final exam. Where it counts like 2/3 of your grade. Like this quarterback selection is going to make or break his tenure as the general manager. If he picks a quarterback, whoever he picks it to, if they're Joe Burrow, he's going to be the GM for the next 12 years. If they're Zach Wilson, there will be a new GM by 2025. It boils down to that. The quarterback he picks. And I think at least perception-wise for Texan fans, making sure that those 3 first-rounders that came from the Deshaun trade turn into something just so that we can take a victory lap at some point on that. I don't know if that matters as much to Cal McNair, but I think it matters a lot to fans. Like what does the end return on the Deshaun Watson trade look like? So I think moving forward, I think those are the 2 big things for him.
Yeah, I think when we look at the Deshaun situation just from a trade perspective, I was looking at this the other day. If I remember correctly, a year before he was traded, the pressure around Caserio was to deal him now. When Miami was involved, it was get rid of him, get whatever you can.
Yep.
And the offer on the table was not what Cleveland was offering. Right. It was a decent offer. Don't get me wrong. I think it was 2 firsts, a couple, and then some other draft capital. But Nick really, from a poker face perspective, and I see it on the, people say it a lot. I don't know if anybody can read his poker face. And he held out for a whole nother year, waited till the lawsuits were settled, which is prime, capital. Like that's when you're going to gain the most from Deshaun. And to me, when I look at that, I'm like, I don't know if a lot of GMs would have done that. I think a lot of GMs would have traded him to Miami at that time.
I think that might be one of his, I'll call it superhero powers as a GM, is that it's a form of patience, but it's a patience with a willingness to sit amidst heavy criticism or pressure to do something, or, just I don't think you make it through these 2 years of the Texans as the general manager without just a complete ability to, I won't say to shut yourself off from the outside noise. I think he hears it. I know he listens to us,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know he hears it, but the ability to not internalize it, you know what I mean? The ability to not take it personally, the ability to make it not affect the way, to be able to filter it out enough to where it doesn't affect your decision-making and your ability to do your job to the best, to the best of your ability. I think he's got an uncanny way of doing that. And I think it's accentuated by the fact that I think Bill O'Brien, who never should have been the GM in the first place, was the total opposite of that.
Right.
I think a lot of the reason why Bill O'Brien made such bad deals is he was totally impatient. I could envision Bill in a negotiation just saying, you know what, cool, here, Whitney, here's $58 million over 4 years, fine. I don't feel like I got to get this off my desk. And that's how you wind up giving out a lot of bad contracts. That's how you wind up giving up too much draft capital for guys. That's how that's how you end up giving up a 3rd round pick instead of a 5th round pick for Duke Johnson. A 3rd round pick instead of a 6th round pick for Garyon Conley. Things like that. So I think Nick's got a real ability to, in a way, ignore the noise and kind of go about his job. And I think I don't know that a GM makes it through the last couple of years without the ability to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. So prior to this conversation, you mentioned, quarterback at 2, he's got to get that right. Sean, do you see a world where there is not a quarterback at 2? Do you see a world where Nick comes out of this with a quarterback, but it's not at 2?
I'm trying to envision that. I know the camp that you're in. Is it you're a don't take a QB at 2 guy, right?
It's not that I don't want to take a quarterback at 2. I agree with the premise that a quarterback is needed.
Yeah.
I just don't buy into. I don't buy into the quarterbacks. One, I know he said he would draft a quarterback with David, as that he would draft a quarterback no matter who the representation is. Part of me still thinks that there's part of that may not be fully true. Bryce, it's just the outlier aspect. It's like to sink that amount of draft capital and just from a value perspective, if that doesn't work, based on who he has liked in the past at quarterback, that just seems like a massive reach to me.
Yeah.
I like Anthony Richardson, but I don't like him enough to use it at 2. But if I was to take a quarterback, I'd take Anthony Richardson just because I think if this team is development and this team is, they're going to do everything right by the players and put him in positions to succeed, I think he has the highest ceiling. But I also look at it like, if you wanted to take a quarterback at 2,
mm-hmm.
you went with the defensive-minded head coach.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen in the NFL that typically that does not go well when paired with a rookie quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it's like, let's set Demeco up then. Like if we're gonna hire Demeco, I don't want Demeco to be set up for failure. I want him to be set up for success. So if we know that's the side of the ball he's going to succeed in, let's grab Will Anderson.
Yeah. Yeah. First to answer your first question, I have a hard time envisioning a scenario where they don't take a quarterback. I think these 2 quarterbacks have perceptually not just set themselves apart from the other quarterbacks, but I think have set themselves apart and done enough to show that they're worth the risk at the top of the draft to the people that matter. And so, so I don't see that happening. I think the other thing for me is, okay, if you're going to pass on one of those quarterbacks, then is who you're taking it to considered a surefire, just an ass kicker. And I know Will Anderson had early in his career at Alabama had that label. And then this past season, he was good, but not great. And now people are kind of picking away at his size, not to the extent they do with Bryce Young, but he's viewed as a little undersized. He's not viewed as a generational prospect. Jalen Carter and getting into the trouble that he got into right before the combine, I think really kind of the word I use is destabilize the top five. Like I think there's a chance Chicago is still hanging on to the first pick if Jalen Carter had just not drag raced and been in shape for his pro day. He's that good. And so what is Jalen Carter? Has Jalen Carter done enough on the negative side to where he would be off the Texans board or at least off the first round for them? I could see that scenario depending on how you view leadership traits and maturity and all of those things. So now you're getting into, okay, Tyree Wilson or this or that. I don't know that the alternative, I don't know that there's a tremendous opportunity cost in this particular draft if you're going to take the risk of Bryce Young or CJ Stroud at 2, that you're passing on something where you go, well, we're passing on generational prospect XYZ. So I think the one, maybe the one thing that could make Nick rethink it would be if he got some sort of Godfather offer from somebody other than the Colts,
like the Falcons,
the Falcons or the Raiders. Or the Commanders. The problem is then, especially with the Commanders who are picking like 16, you're moving too far back. Exactly. So 7 is about, that's the Raiders right there. Falcons are 8th. The Bears moved back to 9th, so they weren't afraid to do that. They felt a certain kind of way. I still think the Bears might end up drafting Jalen Carter with
probably will.
Pick. The same way the day they made the trade, that was my prediction, because Ryan Poles comes from a culture where they're okay kind of taking some character risks in Kansas City. So I don't see a scenario where that happens, other than if they got some monster trade offer. Look, Nick knows the guys in Las Vegas, Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. Maybe they're having conversations. Who knows? I think they're going to come away with one of these 2 quarterbacks, and it'll be fun. No idea if it'll work out. More of them don't work out than do work out, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think with Will Anderson, I think this last year you kind of played out of position a little bit. Really didn't play his hands in the dirt, which is where he thrives. Would definitely be more hands in the dirt in the NFL. So, but I could see the Falcons or Raiders. But I think like even if you wanted Will Anderson, and this is kind of where it gets tricky. I don't know if you could do a deal with the Colts, because it's the Colts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like that'd be an ideal target in my mind too, because you can gut them while also you don't believe in the quarterback. Maybe it impact. I don't know. There's just so many scenarios.
You're right. You're totally right. It's a huge swing for either side. If you did a deal with the Colts and let them move up to 2 from 4 to go get one of those quarterbacks because you feel strongly enough, like I don't think these guys are the guy.
Right.
Then you almost like if you're that confident in your evaluation, not only are you gutting your division rival of picks, but if you're right in your assessment, you're handing them a poison pill in the process
for 5 years.
Yeah, for 5 years that they're, or for at least a few years,
at least 3 or 4.
To. Yeah. So it's a really intriguing scenario. Probably some fun talking points. At some point, I'll dust that off in like early April when we've run out of things to, run out of scenarios, and we're throwing everything against the wall on the show, but it's fun. Like that. I hate that they lost the first overall pick in the draft by beating the Colts. It would have been nice to be picking first instead of second, obviously. But them picking second does add way more intrigue to all this.
It definitely does. It definitely does. It kind of is what it is in that situation. Where did you land on that? Were you like, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't tank?
I knew. I knew they weren't going to tank. Now, should they have played Brandon Cooks? Should they have played Laramie Tunsil? I think if you don't play those guys, it's pretty obvious what you're doing.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that from ownership on down, they wanted to win the game.
Sure.
People are acting like Lovey going for 2 was him sticking it to the Texans.
Right.
There's a lot of people taking that sort of victory lap. I know for a fact, because there was that rumor that week that Lovey had gone into Cal McNair's office to lobby for his job. And I saw Cal at the press conference the day after the season, the day after they fired Lovey. They had that press conference where Nick and Cal were both up there talking that day. And I talked to Cal for a little bit after that press conference, and I asked him about that. I asked him about, did Lovey go in and lobby for his job? And he said, we have a standing meeting every week. He and Lovey met every Monday or whatever day of the week it was. So it's not like it's not like he marched into Cal's office and Cal hadn't seen him in a month. And he was like, hey man, listen, this 3-13 season is not my fault. I'm going to tell you right now. He didn't do that. They had a standing meeting, and Cal said in that meeting, he told Lovey to go win the Indianapolis game. Go win the game. So they wanted to win from ownership on down. There's probably Texan fans are going to be angry hearing that, but he told them to go win the game. So, and look, the last thing you want to do as an owner is tell your guys not to win the game based on what's going on in Miami, right? With Stephen
That'd
Ross.
be terrible press.
Yeah. So how did I feel about it when it happened? I knew that the players were going to play really, really hard because that's what players do. Like anytime Seth hears about that, he's like, I don't know if people understand. Like guys are playing for their jobs, the guys aren't going to go out there and not try.
Right.
In the moment, as I was watching it was a road game. So I was up at the station watching it in our theater lounge up there. That's where we watch the road games. And I was up there with Clint Sterner watching it because we were getting ready. We do post game up there.
Yeah.
Yep. And I pushed a chair over after Jordan Akins caught the touchdown. I did push a chair over because at that point,
man.
I'm not a root for losing throughout the season, guy.
I was just about to point that out because I remember at the beginning, or maybe it was a bit beginning. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks in. You said on air, I will worry about the draft when draft time comes. Right now, I just want to enjoy good football. Whatever that leads to, it leads to. Yeah,
and that's generally how I am. I just have a hard time rooting against my team. But it was one of those things like, okay, now the end is in sight. You know what I mean? Like now we're this close.
Right.
We've come this far. We may as well get something out of it. And I think it wasn't just that they won. It was that the football gods were just giving us a gigantic middle finger in the process. Like are you kidding me? 2 4th and 12 and a 4th and 20 and a 2-point conversion. It was just like the most improbable comeback ever. The 4th and 20 goes through, literally goes through a guy's hands.
Safety.
I can't express this enough, Ari. If it had just grazed off a finger, it's not a touchdown. You didn't have to catch it, just have it change direction. It was a swish. It went through in between his hands and didn't touch anything. It touched no rim. It was crazy. And it lands right in Jordan Akins' hand. Jordan Akins, who, was this revelation for 9 games at the end of the year. It was just wild. Yeah. Crazy.
I think he had to have done it on purpose. I've watched that play over and over again.
It looks like it's the only viable explanation. You're probably right.
His elbows aren't fully extended if you look at the clip.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so the Colts literally, because I think they moved up 2 spots with that loss.
They did. They would have been 6th and they finished and instead they're 4th.
I don't know. And then Davis Mills makes the prettiest throw he's made in his entire career in the NFL on that 4th and what was it? That 4th and 15 of the sideline.
To Cooks.
The perfect placement. We didn't see him do that consistently for 2 years, but we got to see him do it when it mattered. To
Cooks, who quit on the team in the middle of the year.
Right.
That was the other. There's middle fingers everywhere in that whole thing. So that probably contributed more to my frustration in that moment than the actual winning of the game was the way that they won the game. They had wound up winning. 27 to 19 or something like that. They're like, all right, well, it is what it is. But holy crap, the way that
final
happened.
Drive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. All right, so free agency has. It's been a different free agency for the Texans this year. I think everybody kind of knew where they were. I think Nick knew, the organization knew where they were the last 2 years, and I think what he was doing was just clearing out. I've said it before. I can't think of another rebuild, Sean, that has been anything like what Nick Caserio inherited.
Mm-mm.
If you add all the storylines, if you add the cap space, if you add the fact that the GM prior was not a GM and could not scout talent and add players through the draft that were going to stick around. He inherited a roster that was just not an NFL roster. Had a quarterback that quit and everything else that came with it. It's but the last 2 years, it's why isn't Nick spending? Why isn't Nick spending? And it's well, it looks like he wants to clear the cap to get to a point, build the foundation through the draft, fill holes through free agency, continue to build through the draft. Once the window ends of the Deshaun draft capital that was gained, I think at that point he's probably all in on what free agency would look like. But what are your thoughts on free agency so far?
I like that he's shopping in a different aisle this year than he's been shopping in the last couple of years. He's brought in 5 or 6 guys who the last few years he brings in guys where you go, okay, well, he's a starter for the Texans. Yeah. Now he's bringing in guys who they're starters for the Texans, but they would start for a lot of teams. So I don't think anybody can have an issue with the prices, the value they're getting on an annual basis for guys like Jimmy Ward and certainly Devin Singletary, Dalton Schultz, Sheldon Rankins. There's myriad of other names. Robert Woods, I think, is a nice signing. It looks like the biggest problem people have is he's not signing these guys for more than 1 or 2 years. And I think the fact of the matter is not a lot of guys get signed for more than 1 or 2 years in the NFL anymore. The NFL's got kind of smart about the value of certain players, and it's become more of a disposable sort of league. I think the combination of free agency and the Tunsil extension in the same week, I think, is going to be indicative of how he's going to go about that. I think they're going to operate a lot like the Astros. That's what I said to Seth earlier this week, which is they're by and large, they are going to look to find guys and pay their own when they can. And if possible, try to pay them early if it makes sense. Try to get them on deals where they're not hitting the open market and driving the price up. Because we've seen the Astros do that with Bregman and Altuve and Jordan. And then even a guy like Verlander, once he was in-house, they signed him to an extension, things like that. I think they're gonna feel like Tunsil's a known commodity to them. They watch him work every day. They watch it's not just film on game day that they've watched of him. They've watched how he's operated. They've watched how he's operated as a highly paid player. And it's been, especially last year, it's been good. So I think their strategy is going to be, with a few exceptions probably, would be to pay their own. And then you fill the roster with shorter term deals with guys that want to be here. I think the biggest thing is creating an environment that guys actually want to come play here. I think Demeco is a big step in that direction. I think Jack Easter being gone is another huge step in that direction. Like, I don't know that Demeco's here if Jack's still in the building. My guess is no.
Right. I would agree.
Yeah, total guess. Total guess. But my guess is no. So I'm as far as what they've done in free agency, I don't get as worked up about the lack of multi-year deals as other folks do. The Dalton Schultz one to me was the one that made me feel like they were a real football team again. It'd been a long time. Like Jimmy Ward's a nice player, and Sheldon Rankins, I was like, oh, okay, well that's it. He's been a good player, at times. None of them are world beaters, but they're good, solid football players. Shaq Mason, the trade for Shaq Mason, that was a good trade. But the Dalton Schultz one was the one that made me kind of sit up and go, oh, okay, well, this is a guy who played under the franchise tag last year. Like, this is a guy who statistically has been in categories that only include Travis Kelce and TJ Hawkinson and Mark Andrews and guys like that. Like, that, to me, that felt like when Tyrann Mathieu decided to come here back in 2018. Yeah. Where you're like, oh, okay. Like the Texans they drafted Deshaun Watson, and it was coming off of Watson's rookie year, and he only played 6 games or started 6 games. But you knew you had something special in him. And you had Hopkins and Clowney on the team. So you got JJ, obviously, but he'd been hurt the last couple of years. You had star power on the team. Yep. But the Texans were still, I think, kind of viewed as sort of a second-class citizen compared to the elite teams in the league. And then Tyrann Mathieu decides to come here like, okay, well, that's a guy who was almost Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. He's a star. I know he'd been injured, but he's a big name. Dalton Schultz is not as big a name as Tyrann Mathieu, but I think he's in that same category of player where, like, okay, wow, like this guy's he's a good football player who probably had options. Yep. And he chose to come to the Texans. So that was the one for me that I felt like, okay, man, now this thing feels like it's moving in the right direction. I don't care if it would have been nice if that is one signing. I'm like, if they had signed him for 3 years, I'd be like, awesome, give him 3 years. I feel like he's going to age just fine.
26, young guy.
Yeah. But it's 1 year. And my guess is that he is probably looking at this 1 year to try to cash in. Like you said, he's only 26. So he's going to try to be cashing in here at some point. But that he saw this as an optimal opportunity to possibly do that without knowing who the quarterback was going to be, that he had that sort of trust in probably Demeco Ryans, Bobby Slowick, the system, the Kubshanistani system, as Seth likes to call it.
It's so funny.
Yeah. So that was the one of these signings. But overall, I'm happy. I'm happy with what Nick's doing. I think he's got a lot of line drive singles and doubles in this free agency class. There's nothing that's strapping you free agency wise or contract wise. And I think a lot of it too is he's probably waiting to see how whoever they get to be their long-term solution at quarterback is going to be. Like if whoever they draft at quarterback shows over the next season or two that they're going to be the guy, well, now you start looking to go find guys that you sign for 4 or 5 years because you know what the trajectory of the franchise in general is going to kind of look like.
Yeah, and I also think I liked the Shaq Mason signing or trading. I thought that was probably one of the more significant trades that happened, probably the biggest addition just based on what we've seen from this offensive line. But when you look at Dalton Schultz and you just look at the 1-year deal, I think it ends up being like $6.25 million minus incentives. It has the opportunity to reach 9. I look at like players like him and Sheldon Rankins, and I say I could see by the bye next year a potential mid-year extension long term, right?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of questions answered within the first 8 to 9 weeks of next season, right? If there's a quarterback added, if that quarterback's performing well, and there's a connection with Dalton Schultz, maybe entering the bye, it's, hey, we'd like to go down a 3-4 year, deal, whatever it may be. But I think it gives him the opportunity to operate under that premise that if these guys work and they show me every day in the building that they are bought into the culture and bought into what we're trying to do.
Totally.
Here, I could do an extension mid-season. I got you on the cheap already because it was a bad free agent class. Now I'm able to double down.
It's a chance for both sides to sell themselves to each other.
Correct.
It's that sort of burn-in period to sell themselves to each other. So I think that's a really, really good point. And there's two. I've heard we have people text in like, well, the other thing is if Dalton Schultz leaves to go on a big deal somewhere, then you get a compensatory pick. I think the dicey thing about that, what people don't realize, you just don't automatically get compensatory picks. Like there's a formula to it where it's a net in the whole thing. It's not, okay, we had 5 free agents leave and go sign deals somewhere, so we're getting 5 picks. Well, not if you sign 5 guys or more. It cancels everything out. So that part gets a little bit dicey. Those compensatory picks aren't automatic. And if you're operating the way Nick is with so many 1- and 2-year contracts, you're going to be dipping into free agency every year. So that part to me is maybe that's kind of funny money. You know what I mean? Like that's fuzzy math. I think more what you're talking about with the chance to really sell yourself to each other, or if the season's not going the way you want it to, Dalton Schultz maybe gets you a 3rd-round pick at the trade deadline or something like that.
Well, yeah, 100%. Or you can franchise him if you want to have more control, to have more time to negotiate. I mean, there's so many different options that he could actually go down with this path.
Yep.
I think in the comp pick section, like they only got a comp pick this year because of the forfeited picks, if I remember correctly. Like it had nothing to do with the signings of free agency. It was pure luck at this point that they got a 7th-round pick.
I didn't know this rule.
I didn't either.
They're unless there's 32 comp picks given out, then if there's less than 32, then they just start over with the draft order and give out 7th-round picks until they get to 32. I don't know what the rationale is behind that. I just love that the Texans, unless they move that pick, we're going to get Mr. Irrelevant on our team.
Right. I thought it was the weirdest thing. It was very much like that Oprah gif where it's like you get a, and it's like everybody gets a 7th-round pick. Where it's just like nobody probably knew that rule even existed. To be honest with you,
I had no idea. I don't, and still I don't even get the logic behind it. But I'm like, I'm here for it. I'll take the 259th pick in the draft, baby.
Exactly, Brock Purdy. Yeah, no, for sure. So when you're looking at this defense now, obviously it seems to be more and more Matt Burke is going to be the play caller. It hasn't been announced, but then, the Texans put out a tweet yesterday, like new defensive players playing under Matt Burke. Like there's little things happening where it looks like that'll be the direction. I think this defense is going to take a massive step. I know you said like we don't really know with Stingley. I actually think Stingley in a Demeco Ryans scheme, the way that he asks his corners to play. I had Gary and Conley on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about his tape, and he's going to fit really well with Demeco's scheme. Yeah. And I think he could do really well. He was a press man in college. He played massive zone, like a ton of zone last year. Now he's going back to playing press man, very physical corner. What do you think of this defense as a whole now with Sheldon Rankins, like all these players that have been added?
I think I'm with you on Stingley. My comment before was more about what he had done so far, just the mystery still. But I'm 100% in agreement with you, Ari, on what he could look like this year. I don't minimize the fact that this will be the same defense that Sauce Gardner had his Defensive Rookie of the Year season in last year. Stingley looked so out of place all season long last year. And it was frustrating, not only because you're not maximizing this asset, it wasn't fun to watch.
No, it was terrible.
Like if they drafted him as a zone corner, first of all, you'd never use the third overall pick on a zone corner. But let's pretend they drafted him because he fit in that system better. Then I could live with that. But not only is he being misused, he's being misused in the most boring way possible.
Right.
And at times when they let him actually man up on guys, he did some good things. So So I'm with you on Stingley. I love the addition of Ward next to Petrie and the versatility that you have with both safeties. The fact that both have played slot corner at times, the fact that Petrie does a lot of his damage by being up near the line, that Jimmy Ward can play center field for you, or you can shift the two back. That Petrie got so much experience at free safety last year to go with the things he does up near the line of scrimmage to be disruptive. I think it's going to be a really fun safety tandem. I feel really good about the secondary. Steven Nelson was good last year. Desmond King was decent last year. So I think the secondary, this is the best I've felt about the secondary, maybe since Kareem Jackson and Jonathan Joseph were part of it. So there's that. I think there's still a lot of work to do in the front seven. Christian Harris should take a step. We'll see if Denzel Perryman can kind of recapture some of his magic. The defensive line it's a lot of bodies. Sheldon Rankins is an upgrade over some of the guys they have. I still think that there's a big void on the edge. Jerry Hughes was his season was kind of top heavy last year. He had, he did things kind of in bunches, but you got more out of him overall than you thought you were going to. Grenard needs to kind of have a comeback season
and stay healthy.
Yeah, and stay healthy. Yeah, exactly. So I don't feel great about the front seven. So I think they made some improvements. I think it'll be a better front seven. I think what makes me feel good about the front seven is Demeco Ryans. I think that's the area of the field where you've seen guys in San Francisco. You've seen C-level players become B-plus level players. You've seen B-level players become A-level players in that front seven. So is Demeco going to have his hands in the clay like he would as a linebackers coach or defensive coordinator? Obviously not to that extent because he's the CEO now of the operation. Not. Yeah, exactly. I don't want him micromanaging like that. But I trust that he's bringing in and finding guys who have the similar acumen for teaching and developing that he has. So I'm optimistic about the defense. If the defense can get to the middle of the pack, they were 22nd in DVOA last year, and that was with being just atrocious against the run.
Oh, yeah.
If they can just get to the middle of the pack and you got a rookie quarterback who comes in and looks like he's not – I'm not saying he needs to be a Pro Bowler, but doesn't look overwhelmed, like he can move the football, he can get you points. It's got a chance to be a really fun season because the schedule is not – they cross over with the NFC South. They play 6 games in this division, which is still that's a pretty nice division to be playing 6 games in. Now, some of those teams are saying the same thing about the Texans.
Absolutely.
Colts and the Titans. But my point is there's a lot of winnable games on the schedule. So I feel better. I mean, it's hard not to feel better about the defense. There's nothing that they've lost that I feel like, okay, well, they're going to take a step back. And I think there's probably still another move or two in free agency that might be available. So we'll see. And then we'll see obviously what they do in the draft with that 12th pick. That'll be the big mystery. Do they go get a weapon for the quarterback, or do they go get somebody they feel can impact that front seven?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. You're right, at 12, that's probably going to be the answer on defense, most likely, unless they pair the young quarterback with a wide receiver potentially. But I think on the defensive side, I look at Vinovich, the addition of Vinovich on the edge, and I look back at his tape in New England, and he was an extremely productive player. Goes to Cleveland, disappears. It seems to happen to a lot of players. I think he could be a really good addition, but you're right. Like maybe I don't even know if Tyrese Wilson will fall like to 12. Maybe Cansey. If Jalen Carter's there, though, can you see a situation where in the past the Texans stay away from character issues? Can you see that being a possibility?
I don't, and here's why. I thought about that. I'm like, okay, do the Texans bring in Jalen Carter for one of their 30 visits?
Yeah.
And that would be really interesting if they did. It would be a fun talking point if they did.
It would.
Because as you know, the Texans tend to have a higher threshold for what constitutes good character, both on and off the field, I think, than a lot of teams do. And Carter's got issues in both of those areas right now. I was talking my way through it. I think even on the air, I was kind of talking. I was like workshopping verbally with Seth about this. And I started thinking, okay, they have the 12th pick. unless they were to move up, they felt good enough to move up. My feeling is they're at a spot in the draft. They're not going to use a second pick on him, obviously.
No.
They're in a spot in the draft where if he's done enough cleansing to where the Texans would feel good about him at 12, somebody's going to take him way before 12.
Okay.
That
makes sense. That makes sense. That's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like Seattle,
right.
The Raiders, Chicago, I forget who the Eagles are there, all these teams that probably maybe have a sort of a kind of a lower standard for what is draftable and not draftable. I have a hard time believing that the Texans have a threshold at 12 that would not have already been met by one of those teams in front of them. So I think it's going to be a moot talking point because, in other words, I think Jalen Carter is he's either going 5th or he's going 28th. You know what I mean? I don't know that he gets to 9th or 10th or 11th,
Yeah, that's totally fair. You're actually, now that I think about it, if the Texans are willing to take him at 12, then there's got to be somebody else.
Then Detroit's taking him at 6.
Right.
Yeah.
So my before the Dalton Schultz signing, and this will be the last Texans thing, but before the Dalton Schultz signing, I thought, man, I hope there's a scenario where the Texans trade back from 12 to maybe a quarterback falls Will Levis with the Commanders, and they could draft Michael Mayer. That is, for me, an ultimate win scenario. I think he's the best tight end in the draft. I think and you obviously, I would assume, feel the exact same way given your love for his school. So
I love Michael Mayer. Nick knows I love Michael Mayer. He gives me crap about it both on our show and via text all the time.
Nice.
He can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay, my phone rang, and I hang on. How do I get back to the? Because I can't see you anymore.
Uh-oh.
That's okay. Why are people calling me?
You using a Mac to record?
No. Yeah, hang on.
Yeah.
Where's my Chrome? There we go. Got it. I'm back.
Okay.
About Mayer. Yeah, Nick gives me crap all the time about that. About my love for Michael Mayer. He the day of the combine when they were interviewing him, he jokingly texted me and asked if I wanted to be brought in on FaceTime for the Michael Mayer interview. So he knows my love for Michael Mayer.
Did he tell you where he has him on his board?
What's that?
Did he tell you where he's at on his board?
He did not. No,
okay.
No, yeah, right. He didn't. I know he likes him a lot as a player, but that's not anything new. He likes him, obviously. But I don't know where he is. Even among tight ends, there's a lot of good tight ends in this class, and they're different shapes and sizes of tight ends. I think Mayer's a different player than Kincaid, who's a different player. The kid from
Oregon?
Georgia,
Darnell Washington.
Washington, yeah. I was gonna say the non-Brock Bowers kid, Washington. He's a freak, like all those things. Yeah. So I think Mayer is. I think he'd be a great fit for the system, given the need for blocking and catching the football that goes. Dalton Schultz is not the greatest blocker in the world, so I almost think it's one of those systems that's like tight end agnostic. Like any type of tight end can probably fit into this system in some way. Mayer at 12 is interesting because I do like Michael Mayer a lot. The one thing he doesn't have that maybe some of the other tight ends have is he's not like this dynamite athlete. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he's a brute. He's a brute, but his got kind of shorter arms. He's pretty good at catching contested balls in traffic, but he's, high pointing them and things like that is not like this a strong point is. He's really, I think he's underrated as an athlete, but he's not like a superb athlete kind of thing. So my dream scenario is that teams just kind of start passing on tight ends a little bit because they're like, okay, well, there's 5 or 6 of them. We'll just wait till day 2 to get one.
Yeah.
And everybody just slides. And then at 33, they get him. That would be my dream scenario. 12 might be overdrafting him slightly, but that's probably getting a little too cute. You know what I mean? Like he's a good player. If they took him at 12, I think they'd be getting a really, really good football player. But I like your idea, Ari, of trading back at 12.
Yeah.
In fact, I just put up.
I think that's what happens.
I feel pretty strongly that they're not moving off of 2, but I feel pretty strongly they will move off of 12. We saw them do it last year at 13. I actually put up a poll like an hour ago.
Oh.
And I said, assuming it's a QB at 2, what do you think Caserio will do with the 12th overall pick? Not what you want him to do. What's your prediction? And the 4 things are wide receiver, best defensive player available, trade up, trade down. Which would you pick?
I would trade back.
That's what you think he would do?
No, that's what I would do.
Oh, okay, no. My question was, what do you think?
Oh, I think.
What do you think he'll do?
I think he'll trade back as well. Yeah,
I do too.
It all comes down to the value. So
Yep.
he's all value. Everything that he can do is a value thing. So if he has a guy ranked that he doesn't believe it is going to be taken, he's going to move back. And he even said it. He has 4 guys at each pick that he's comfortable with.
Yeah.
So if you think about how he approaches each pick from that situation, 4 players, if you're moving back 4 spots, you're guaranteed to have one of those players.
Yes. That's how they wound up with – I mean, okay, this sounds like I'm saying something snarky here because Kenyon Green had a bad rookie year.
Sure.
But that's how they wound up with Kenyon Green last year. I think they were sitting at 13. They probably looked at Jordan Davis, Kyle Hamilton, Kenyon Green, maybe one other guy. And they said, okay, well, 2 of these guys are going to be gone probably. They knew at least one would be because they were talking to the team that was moving up.
For him.
Philly, right. And they were comfortable with that. I totally agree with you. So I could see something like that. Washington's a good one. Like Washington felt like they need to jump some team between 13 and 15. But
I think it's Tennessee, right? I think Tennessee is 14, so they're going to need a quarterback. So
I know the Jets are 13 because you can't.
Oh, that's right.
You can't open up ESPN.com without finding that out because of the potential Aaron Rodgers trade. I'm pulling up Tankathon right now, the NFL draft order.
11th overall, so never mind, they're in front of them.
Yeah, Tennessee's 11. New England's 14. Yeah, so there's no real QB hungry teams. I guess the thing, if you were Washington, that you get worried about is somebody trading up with the Jets or the Patriots or whoever.
Yeah.
Or Green Bay. Like when the Texans traded up to get Deshaun Watson at 12, they did that, I know, because Arizona was sitting there at 13 ready to draft a quarterback. Arizona wanted to draft a quarterback and would have probably drafted Deshaun. So that'll get interesting. I do think he finds a way to move back there. Like he moved back last year and there wasn't a quarterback involved in that at all.
Could be Detroit. Could be, they're at 18.
Maybe. Yeah.
They're going to need a guy behind Goff. If Levis, let's say like in a perfect scenario, Levis or Richardson fall to 12 and they already have their quarterback.
Yep.
You have Minnesota, Detroit, Washington, Tampa Bay, and Baltimore, who are all potentially going to need quarterbacks.
Yeah, like and I've even heard. Did you say Minnesota?
I did.
Yeah, so
I think they like Anthony Richardson, right?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of quarterback smoke around Minnesota lately. It feels like this. I know if that scenario plays out, Nick will be working the phones like a mother. That's a lock. He will be working the phones, trying like crazy to move back. He's the anti Brian Gaine. Brian Gaine did 2 drafts and didn't move a single time. I think practically half the guys he's drafted came from a pick that was moved, either forward or back.
Right. Yeah. And Brian Gaines did nothing in free agency either. It was kind of weird. It was like, what did you do?
Yeah.
What did you do? But then he landed with Buffalo. I don't know. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to watch for sure. It's weird to me though. Like this is like the like Christmas, obviously for a lot of fans. But like, do you remember when you were a kid and like Thanksgiving happened and then like Christmas just took forever? Like you were just like, is it ever like what else can happen between now and Christmas?
Ooh.
That is literally how it feels now every day. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, can this just happen?
I know.
I don't know. It's been a while.
I know even more than last year because we know that there's probably going to be a quarterback involved in this thing.
Right?
The Texans are like it's fun because the Texans are front and center in all this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's any sort of talk about the top of the draft. It's all Panthers and Texans right now. So there's no shortage of opinions out there.
Colin Cowherd never talks about the Texans. I watch him every night before I go to bed. He literally will not talk about the Texans at all. He's been talking about them a lot lately just because he likes what they've been doing in free agency. And
he likes it.
He does. He does. And it's super strange.
Yeah. His producer's from Houston.
Jason McIntyre?
No.
The actual producer.
His actual producer behind the scenes. Greg Toohey is his name.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's from Houston. He listens to the station.
That's cool.
He'll text me or DM me from time to time during our show to say, hey, Colin's going to talk about this. Or I can tell recently, like, like Colin asked, I think it might have been asked Sean Payton a question about something Houston related.
Yeah, the owners.
Back when Payton was on there,
Yeah, he was talking about Cal.
Yeah, and that question came from Tui.
Oh,
okay.
Like,
and then he would text me and be like, "Hey, I got Colin to ask this or whatever." So, Tui's a great dude. He's from Houston, so that's always fun because there was a period for like 2 weeks where Seth and I were just destroying Cowherd like every day because of all the Peyton stuff.
No, it makes sense,
right? And I would text Greg and I'd be like, "Hey, man. We just destroyed Colin today." He's like, "Oh, yeah, I was listening." Like, he doesn't care. Like,
he doesn't care.
It's water off his back. Yeah, dude. For every 100,000 people that start destroying him, that's another $1 million the guy makes.
He's
a machine.
He's so good at what he does. Now he's got the Volume Network that he's doing as well with the podcast side. He's got the wine business. Really smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before I let you go, Sean, because I kept you longer than I said I would. Favorite? I can't let you leave without talking about the WWE.
Yeah.
Your favorite WWE moment in history?
My favorite WWE moment, probably, I am going to go old school.
Okay.
Old school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My favorite, my moment, my WWE moment where I'm like, oh man, like this, I got to watch this every week. This actually like predates, this is probably right around the time where Hulkamania was probably being born back in the mid 80s.
Wow.
When go look it up, Roddy Piper hitting Jimmy Snuka in the head with a coconut on Piper's Pit.
Oh, yep. I've seen that one.
Yeah. That was, I was 14 or 15 at the time. It was 1984, I think. So I was 15. Yeah. Us nerds were talking about that in the cafeteria.
I can only imagine.
That's my favorite moment that nobody listening or watching this right now has probably seen. Like as far as the Attitude Era, that's a little more current, kind of more current stuff. Boy, there was so much stuff from the Attitude Era. The Montreal screw job, just because of the historic significance of all the ripple effects from
huge.
Yeah. From the Montreal screw job. Anything with the Tyson and Austin build up to WrestleMania that year.
That was big.
Gold, absolute gold. And then I'm a huge Mick Foley fan. So the Hell in the Cell was crazy. I've had a chance to interview Mick a few times since then, and he's a really good guy and a great storyteller, and just somebody who's I've always loved him as a performer because he's like one of the least physically gifted guys,
right? And he gives up his body.
He gives up his body, but it's not even that he's some sort of stunt man where you feel sorry for him because he's hurt all the time. That dude can talk, like he's a great promo. So those are just some. I mean, there's so many, but those are the ones that. Pretty much you can know that any of mine either come from like the advent of WWF when Vince first bought it from his dad from like 83 through like 85, where the company was really transitioning, and then anything from like 97 through like 99. I mean, like I think of things just like Chris Jericho debuting.
Oh my gosh,
Rock,
that was like the hugest Raw ever.
That was like stuff like that. Like it's just. You sent me that TikTok the other day with all those, with all the Rock doing all those impersonations and cutting his promos and clowning guys and stuff. I'm like, man, they just don't have stuff like this anymore.
No, they don't.
Yeah, what's yours?
Yeah, I think it's tough, and I honestly can't remember the specifics. I tried to find it all day yesterday, and I think it's also because of another moment that was happening in my life. So I was 10. I was being babysat by like this extremely gorgeous girl named Holly. She had a sister named Christy. And she was probably one of the prettiest women I've ever seen at that time, right?
Yeah.
I was 10. And so I got to order Royal Rumble. And it was the one where, and I can't remember even who it was. I think it was Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart. But they kept going back and forth on who won the Rumble. It was either Bret or it was
Lex Luger.
97. Okay, it was
90. It was 90.
95.
It was 94. Did they both go over the top at the same time?
Yeah,
it was Lex Luger's 94 Rumble because that was WrestleMania 10 that year.
So they would play they'd play Lex Luger's like entrance music as like he's won, and then it'd go back and it'd be Bret Hart, and then it'd be Lex and then Bret Hart, and then Lex and Bret Hart, and I'm over here flipping out because I was a huge Bret the Hitman Hart fan. And I acted like the biggest nerd in front of Holly, and I'll never forget it because I'm sitting there like pumping my fists, screaming every time Bret Hart's music would come on, and I think to myself, I'm like, I have no shot with her now. Little did I know at that time.
10 years old.
Yeah, right. Little did I know at that time. I had no shot in general.
I love your confidence, though, dude.
So that would have to be it. But anything with Stone Cold or Triple H or The Rock were always fun. I love DX. I thought DX was just that FU was needed, and I think that was such a cool part. It was just a fun time. I really wish I stopped watching after the draft. I just couldn't.
When they started drafting guys on either
side. It was like SmackDown is this and then Raw. There was too much to keep up with at that point. I was like, never mind.
Yeah, the part that I still watch it to this day. I'll watch WrestleMania next weekend. I don't religiously watch Monday Night Raw every week, but I still keep plugged into the product, and my wife enjoys it, fortunately. So we've been to a few WrestleManias together. If there's a pay-per-view on, we watch it on Peacock, that kind of thing. I think the thing that like where it started to go from must watch for me to like, okay, well, I'll still keep watching it, but boy, this really turned me off was when they bought WCW and then they totally botched the invasion angle. Like they had such like a ready-made, like this is what we've been waiting for as fans for like 20 years. Like Crockett turned into WCW, and then Bischoff was going after them.
It was perfect.
It was set up perfect, and they just turned it into Vince McMahon masturbation. You know?
Yeah, it was super weird.
Yeah, like rarely do I take it personal when angles get botched on wrestling. Like, oh, they own the company, they can do whatever they want storyline wise, and it's up to me to like it or not. That was one where I was like, you assholes, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Okay. Well, Sean, thank you so much. Let my listeners and watchers and all of those people know where they can find you.
Sure.
Not that you need to, they already do, but
that's all right. I'm about over communication, baby.
There we go.
So 6 to 10 a.m. on Sports Radio 610 with me and original Houston Texan Seth Payne. You can download the Odyssey app and either listen live or rewind if you're jumping in your car at 7 and you miss the beginning of the show, you can rewind and certainly subscribe to our podcast. Podcast numbers are doing really, really good right now. I have a podcast with John McClain called the Utopia Football Podcast. It's HOU Topia that we do twice a week. So I do that podcast with John, and I have a Sunday show on CBS Sports Radio that I do as well from 1 to 5 p.m. on Sundays nationally. That's also on the Odyssey app. And then on social media, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me at Sean T. Pendergast on Twitter is the easiest one. I think it's Sean.Pendergast on Instagram. But if you search my name, SEAN, and then Pendergast spelled like it sounds, you'll find me on there. So appreciate you having me on, man. This was a lot of fun. We'll do it again for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it, Sean. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap up Texans Unfiltered. I'll catch you guys next week. Make sure you guys hit the click, like, and subscribe, and thanks for viewing.